Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Marta McGovern. I am the special education coordinator that works in the Mountain Vista feeder and also with Rock Canyon High School. We are having a tiny technical difficulty, so it'll take us a couple more minutes to start, but we're super happy you're here.
And I am Kim Bertha. I'm a special education coordinator and I support the Legend feeder. And we do welcome you here and thank you for joining us for a parent engagement session. When we get our technical issues kind of cleared up here, we'll begin. We're focusing on dyslexia and resources that we can offer. And the presenters today are members of the district's dyslexia team. So when we get started, I think Tiffany will be the first one up.
I'm happy to start. Just let me know when the slide deck.
Tiffany, I'll let you know. I'm sorry. Every time I try to share my screen, it's just not happening.
But yeah, Tiffany, go ahead and I guess get started and start sharing information. So, and then we can catch up.
Okay, well, I'm going off the slide deck. So, hi, everybody. I'm Tiffany Reagan. I'm the dyslexia coordinator for Douglas County School District, and I'm here to just share some general information about dyslexia and what we're doing in Douglas County to support our learners. Let's see. I can go ahead and I can pull up my own slide deck and go through that, but then the participants won't be able to see the images. Oh, there we go.
Tiffany, I got it.
Okay.
Hold on one sec. I know, right? It only took this long. Thank you for your patience, everyone. I appreciate it.
Okay, we can go to the next one. Okay. All right, everyone. Hi again. Like I said, I'm Dr. Tiffany Reagan. I'm the dyslexia coordinator and I'm available to answer questions, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview about what we know on dyslexia. So there is an organization called the International Dyslexia Association, and they have published a definition of dyslexia that is accepted by a lot of places. And so I'm just going to give you a minute to read the definition about what dyslexia is. And for me, the big takeaway is that this is a language-based condition. So we don't think of dyslexia as having something to do with mechanical deficits in the eye. It's not a physical reading problem. It is a language-based problem. So things like, behavioral vision therapy, while that might be good for if a child has tracking issues, it's separate from dyslexia. Okay, we'll go to the next one. So how widespread is it? Well, so let's first of all talk about your school population. So in the population of a typical school, you're going to have about 14% of students who qualify for special education services. Now take that population. Of that 14%, about half of them are identified with a learning disability. And of those, about 85% of those students have their primary learning disability in reading and language processing. Now let's go back out to the whole population of the school. And dyslexia can affect up to 15 to 20% of students. And that sounds like a huge number, but we have to remember that dyslexia occurs on a continuum. That does not mean that 15 to 20% of all of our students need to be on an IEP, and that's not true. So let me show you what I mean on the next slide. Oh, no, we have to go back. Should be a continuum. There we go. So like I said, dyslexia occurs on a continuum of severity. So you can have a student who's impacted mildly, moderately, or severely. And so what that means is that a student with a dyslexia profile doesn't necessarily need to be on an IEP to get their instructional needs met. So if a student is impacted mildly, we can probably meet their instructional needs with tier 1 instruction. That means the basic universal instruction that everyone gets, as long as it's a good foundational instruction with maybe some accommodations. If they're moderately impacted, we might need to look at bringing in some extra help. And then if they're significantly impacted, that's tier 3. So that's just to say that students with dyslexia are on this continuum, and not, you won't have 20% of your population over here in the red tier 3. You're probably, I would say, moderately to severely impacted. My guess is around 5 to 7%. And then some of the students who are mildly impacted, you might not ever even identify them because they've learned to compensate so well. Okay, next slide. So here, we skipped one, but common myths. I'm just going to go through a couple common myths. And the first one is, it's a boy thing. So if you'll click on the next slide, yeah. And actually that's not true. We know that boys get identified more often than girls, but what the research has found is that when they started digging into the data and why they were identified, it's because when boys are struggling, they tend to have different behavior that gets noticed more. And so it's just a matter of the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And they found that the girls typically who were identified tends to be compliant, sitting in the back, being very quiet. So it's a little bit easier to overlook. But the occurrence is actually about 49% to 51%, 49% girls, 51% boys. So really it's not statistically significant. Okay. People with dyslexia read backwards, that's all. And then you can press your space bar and it should have an animation. There you go. And that's not true. Dyslexia is so much more complicated than that. It involves language processing. It can involve things like trying to get your thoughts down on paper, learning things, memorizing things. So it's very complicated, and it's a lot more complicated than just seeing things backwards. Okay, next one. They need to try harder. And this one breaks my heart, because if you have kiddos who have been identified with characteristics of dyslexia, they are trying hard. It's a tough road to travel. And I like to use the analogy of, if you have a classroom of students that are going on a hike and hiking up a mountain, the kiddo with dyslexia is wearing a backpack with 25 pounds worth of weight on them. So everybody else has a backpack and you just can't see that it's light. And so they might not get there as fast because it's taking so much more energy to get up that hill or get up that mountain. They're trying hard, but that mental fatigue is real. And it just takes a lot of effort for them to get to the same place sometimes as students who aren't dealing with that. Next, curable. Well, no, it's not curable. We can do things. What we know is that if we can identify some of these issues early and we can get the right interventions in place, that the reading achievement is positively impacted, and it helps students, and we give them the tools to help their way along in school. So early intervention can make a huge difference, but it's not going to cure dyslexia. Okay, next. So here are some of the things that you might not be aware of that students with dyslexia may have some difficulty with. Learning to speak. They might speak a little bit later than peers. Learning the letters and sounds can be challenging. Organizing that written and spoken language. Persisting with and comprehending reading assignments. So if you have, students who are sitting doing the independent reading, it might look like a child is not paying attention or not spending time reading, but they don't have that stamina yet, because it takes so much more energy for them to read on their own. So their independent reading might look different. They might read for 5 or 10 minutes and need a break or need to move around. Okay, it might be too much to ask for them to sit and just read for 45 minutes. So that persistence is hard. Spelling, we see it. Learning a foreign language, and then correctly doing math operations or memorizing number facts. We actually know that memorizing anything that's not connected to meaning can be a little bit more challenging for this group of students. Okay. dyslexia and DCSD. And I believe that's, so we do have a dyslexia website. And if I did put the link there, if you want to copy it down, you can also get to this website through the main Douglas County website. It's just on one of the drop-down menus. But I did want to show you, this is what it looks like. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see a protocol that identifies the process we go through to identify students with dyslexia. Oh, thank you, Marta. And then if you scroll back up, and you don't have to click on this, but just so you know, whenever you click on the word resources, it's going to take you to a page where you have teacher resources and you have family resources. And the family resources, if you're thinking that you might be dealing with this or a family member, I highly encourage you to explore some of these and get involved in some local groups like the Dyslexia Resource Group. They're a great support. And then it just gives you some other websites you can explore to get more information. Okay, and we can go back to the slide deck. And then the next person to present is going to be Renee Van Horn, and she's the assessment specialist and school readiness coordinator. So Renee, welcome, and I will hand it over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Renee Van Horn, and I am an assessment specialist. I support school readiness and the READ Act here in Douglas County. And we're just going to go over a bit of information to provide you with some context for READ supports and how that supports students who might be struggling with reading in Douglas County. So I've linked at the top here the Colorado READ Act website link through the Colorado Department of Education that has a wealth of resources for educators, but also for parents if you're interested in learning more after this presentation this morning. The READ Act, the goal of it really is to get students to be reading minimum competencies or reading at grade level by the end of third grade. That's the goal. And so by having that as a focus, we identify students who are significantly below grade level and have a significant reading deficiency in K through third grades. We do that by using an approved assessment through the state. In Douglas County, our neighborhood schools do use the iReady assessment. And then we do have some charter schools that use the Acadience Reading or Dibble's Next assessment. We start off with an interim assessment. And then from there, when students are identified based upon a set of cut scores set by the state, if they do have a significant reading deficiency, we then use diagnostic assessment information to determine the next steps for that student. We select an overall domain goal based upon a domain of need and literacy. That might be phonological awareness or phonics. It could be fluency, vocabulary, or comprehension. And then we write that goal and then have specific objectives that go for about 4 to 6 weeks that will close the gap on a specific skill and hopefully on that domain, so students catch up to competency over the course of the time that they're on a READ plan. For our youngest learners, our kindergarten students, we also have something called school readiness that really is about a whole child approach. We know that kids just entering school have all kinds of needs coming in, social, emotional, and cognitive and physical. And so using all of that information, they have a readiness plan. Well, for our kindergarten students, their READ plan will actually be embedded into their school readiness plan. So it's one plan to support our youngest learners. As students progress, if they move off of that significant reading deficiency status because they're now above the set cut scores by the state, they remain on a READ plan until they reach grade level competency. And that plan is truly designed as a support mechanism, a communication tool between parents and the school to say, what are the needs and what are the next steps over the course of time. So we're seeing how that gap is closing. And teachers not only set the goal and the objective, but progress monitor in order to ensure that those gaps are being closed. And then we do have some alignment that we're working on so that we're aligning to our special education goals. So the IEP is a special education plan, whereas the READ plan is a general education plan. And that those two plans can work together to support students as readers. The IEP might have a broader reading goal, whereas the READ plan goal would be semester long and then with objectives that are more discrete over shorter periods of time. But we do want our educators to collaborate and work together with each other and with families to help support the closing of those reading gaps. We also want to just update you all on the fact that the READ Act was recently revised in the spring of 2019, and the rules were revised. And as a part of that revision, there is new requirements for K-3 teachers to have 45 hours of professional development around the science of reading. Our teachers are in progress of getting that training now, and that training is provided directly from the state through some vendors that they have. So teachers have an option for in-person or online training modules. And that is a K-3 teaching requirement. As for teachers above K-3, we are offering an aligned professional development opportunity here in Douglas County for those teachers, so they also get some similar information. And then we do also have some revisions to the READ Act with regards to approved programming in kindergarten through third grades as well. There are some advisory lists for core literacy programming, supplemental, and intervention programming. And so our district is currently having those conversations about what programs are on that list and doing some vetting and some piloting of programs in order to align to those new expectations as well. The next person presenting is Rachel Brown, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Rachel Brown. I'm gonna keep my camera off right now because I'm having slight Wi-Fi interruption. I support secondary literacy and professional development here in Douglas County School District. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about some of the resources and go a little bit more into some of the professional learning opportunities for staff. Next slide. There are a variety of resources available for teachers here in the district, but let's start off by talking about some of the professional development opportunities. As Renee mentioned, there is the required K-3 training, and she also mentioned the aligned training for 4th through 12th grade, and that does mirror essentially what the teachers are getting with K-3, and it does provide some lens around dyslexia. And so there are specific resources in there, built in there for teachers with that. For some of your secondary teachers who are using programs like Read 180 and System 44, that aligned training is a requirement of them. We also have a variety of opportunities for teachers to get trained on Orton-Gillingham. There were several opportunities this summer for that, and we have some cohorts that have been continuing to work and process through that and continue that learning through this school year. So we will continue to beef up our professional learning opportunities to support them in general when it comes to supporting literacy, but we also have a series of classes that support dyslexia and so will support teachers in understanding what dyslexia might look like and how they can support students. And those are courses that Dr. Reagan has put together. And then when it comes to curricular resources, as Renee was alluding to, at the K-3 level, we are adjusting and looking at how we can utilize some of those that are on the K-3 Read Approved list. And then at the above that, especially at the secondary level, we are using ones that do support students in a variety of different levels of literacy need. And that does include phonemic awareness and phonics and a variety of other things. And so we do have those resources. And as I was mentioning, for the majority of our middle school, neighborhood middle school and high school, as well as our alternative schools, they do have access to a resource System 44 and Read 180, which is a combination approach that can support students with a variety of literacy needs. And we are revisiting what elementary looks like. And up next, you're right, Marta. Up next is Nate Burgard to talk more about dyslexia and math.
Well, good morning, everybody. Nate Burgard, and I'm a curriculum assessment instruction coordinator here in the Douglas County School District. And while I get the pleasure of supporting a lot of different projects, one of them that comes to the top of my list is supporting math instruction in our school district. And so with that being said, currently in K-8, we have math core curricular resources that are aligned to our 2020 Colorado academic standards and the rigor within. And it's not on this particular slide, but we'll see it on the next one. If in terms of rigor in our standards, we are really asking our teachers and our students, our mathematicians to learn the mathematics from the lens of a conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, as well as the application. Those are really the three pillars of our rigor in our state standards. And from a K-8 standpoint, we have two particular resources that you see on this slide: Envision Mathematics, as well as iReady Classroom Mathematics, being utilized in our K-8 schools to help support this work. And within both of these curricular resources, we have instruction that's aligned to the effective math teaching practices, which come directly from the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. And inherent in both of these programs is really the concrete representational abstract model, or more simply put, the CRA model, where we have the ability to support all of our mathematicians wherever they're entering learning within this CRA model. And in practice, as we're working with our mathematicians, we can scale up all the way to abstract, or if our mathematicians are struggling with some of those abstract concepts, then we have the ability to scale backwards and work from a more representational or concrete manner with our students. And both of these particular resources in our school district do rely on this particular research and evidence-based approach to instructing mathematics. And so that is talking more specifically about our K-8 programming for our math students. And then on the next slide, at the high school level, once again, our teams are anchoring our work in our 2020 Colorado academic standards. Again, there's that components of rigor that are at the forefront of our work, and how do we support our mathematicians in our school district from a procedural fluency standpoint, conceptual understanding standpoint, as well as the application. And then once again, continuing to support all of our teachers with the effective math teaching practices that come directly from the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. And also recognizing that the CRA model that we saw on the previous slide is absolutely applicable for our high schools and helping our mathematicians be successful in learning high school standards.
So when we did the RSVP for the presentation, we did have some questions on there. So Tiffany, do you see any questions that you can answer today? Also, there will be all those questions and answers, because there were about 100 of them plus. We do try to answer them and post it on the website when we also post the presentation on the website. So those will be posted along with this presentation. So Tiffany, did you see any questions that on that list? I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I will look at some also.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I had to rejoin again. Did you say you wanted me to address some of the questions?
Yes, please, Tiffany, if you can. I'll also look for some and I can ask you more.
Okay, absolutely. So I hope everybody can hear me. One question was, I just want to know more about dyslexia. And I know this was a pretty quick overview. One of the books I recommend is called Conquering Dyslexia. It's by Dr. Jan Hasbrook. And what I love about this book is, first of all, it's about this thick, but she writes in just regular layman's terms, and it's an easy read. It's something you can pick up and you can get through it in an afternoon or a weekend, and it's very informative. So I absolutely recommend that. If you aren't able to get it, I do have some copies I'm happy to check out, and you can email me at treagan and the number 1 at Douglas County School District, k12.org. And again, it's TREGAN and the number 1 at dcsdk12.org. One question was, what does the district do if a student has an outside diagnosis of dyslexia? And I want to address 2 things with that. First of all, our school teams can identify students who exhibit characteristics of dyslexia, but we don't diagnose. So if you have a clinical diagnosis, that will be from outside the district. I do want to underscore that we never, ever require an outside diagnosis to meet the instructional needs of your child. I'll say that again. We do not need an outside clinical diagnosis. If we have identified that your child exhibits symptoms of dyslexia, characteristics of dyslexia, then we will create an instructional plan to meet that child's needs. And that's the same if you bring an outside diagnosis in. We'll look at things like how is this child impacted? Is the child mildly impacted, moderately impacted, significantly impacted? What supports do we have in place? And we'll just work with the team to make sure that that instructional plan is meeting that child's needs. And I'm always happy to consult and to help you through the process if you need any support with that. So those are the questions I wrote down.
Yeah, and Tiffany, I think this is kind of for your whole team. I saw a question that was, what are some electronic resources for specifically middle school students?
Oh,
And how do the
Rachel.
students learn how to use them?
So I'm going to give this one to Rachel because she's sort of the expert on one of the programs that we do. And then I can also talk about some of the Google extensions if I need to. But Rachel, are you okay to take that one?
Yeah. So at the middle school level, all of our neighborhood middle schools do utilize a program. System 44 and Read 180, they are a combined approach. System 44 tends to work more with foundational skills for students. And then Read 180 tends to work more in the comprehension, vocabulary, and fluency, although they both do cover all of that. So they both do work on spelling and decoding and comprehension and vocabulary. They have a little, System 44 is a little bit more of an emphasis on those foundational skills. And Read 180 is a little bit heavier of an emphasis on those higher level like comprehension and vocabulary. Students have access to it in specific courses. So it depends on the school, what courses those are available in. At the middle school level, we see a lot of it in our strategies classes, as well as in our dimensions and literacy class. And so that's where students have access to that, and they get the link to log in from their teacher. And from that link, they have access to a personalized student application that's based on their level. And then they also have access to an independent reading library that has audiobooks and ebooks, and that's all on the digital side. In the classroom, they have access to the paper copies, but there's a variety of resources available to the kids on the digital platforms.
Awesome.
Thank you, Rachel.
Marta, I have the questions brought up. Do you want me just to go to the next one, or?
I was just going to ask actually about an iReady I had a question for Renee on here. Okay. So what are some accommodations that can be made while taking the iReady test for students with dyslexia, Renee?
So iReady has some accommodations built in as far as different grade levels and what's orally presented initially versus then what they actually have to read on their own. And the way that was designed was in alignment with the actual standards of having to read to comprehend. But we also know that we have students with different needs. And so then those conversations often go to the school level of what are the accommodations listed on the IEP or 504 plan, or in a read plan, what is the need of the student. And so if you're having questions about that, I think, the best route is always to start with the school, the teacher. And then somebody had also asked about, well, if I am not seeing support and I've requested at an IEP meeting, where do I go? Well, I would say start with that classroom teacher and then potentially a school leader. That's always the best place to start.
Thank you, Renee. We have some questions about spelling tests, guys. So what's a great way for students to be able to study for spelling, because it is so hard? And what are some suggestions you guys have for parents at home helping their kiddos do spelling homework and or study for spelling tests?
Well, I can address that if you want. So as with most any recommendations we make, it certainly depends on the student and their situation. For example, if there's a student who exhibits characteristics of dyslexia and they have some additional support, let's say that they participate in an Orton-Gillingham group, and the Orton-Gillingham group works on patterns. And so that week they will have certain patterns. In an ideal world, on Friday, they would be quizzed on the patterns that they learned in OG. Because if you give students with dyslexia a list of words that seemingly have no meaning or connection to what they're learning in their support, that's going to be very difficult for them. If, however, you need to deal with a spelling list, that's just the way things go, then I would focus on a couple of words. I would find some type of pattern that they can work on. And out of a list of 20, maybe you're working on those 5 words. And those are the words that they are accountable for on Friday. But, I would also talk to the teacher and see how you can collaborate together to come up with a meaningful way to help your student learn those patterns and those rules of the English language.
Thank you, Tiffany. So I think this is a good question on the RSVP. What are some early warning signs of dyslexia? And what should we do if we suspect our child has dyslexia?
That is a really good question. So it's interesting. We can actually start to see some of the red flag issues as early as 3 and 4. Now, I'm not saying that we need to diagnose and label a child that's age 3 with dyslexia. That's not what I'm saying at all. However, what we can do is we can notice when a child struggles with things like learning the letters, the sounds of letters, the names of colors, especially if a child is struggling with learning the letters in their name. If they have 3 letters in their name and it's still not familiar, that's going to be a warning sign. Alone, in and of itself, no, I wouldn't be worried. But when you start seeing red flags in a couple of areas, like maybe there's a delay in learning to speak, maybe there's a delay in learning those letters and sounds and names of colors, or maybe it takes them a while to come up with that name, like they know it's yellow, but it's just a little bit, it takes them a little bit longer to say it. Rhymes, anything with phonemic awareness, are they having a little difficulty rhyming and manipulating sounds and words? And also there's a 50% heritability factor with dyslexia. So if there's a family history of reading difficulties, that's a child that we would want to really pay attention to. So those are really the issues that we look at in any sort of speech language issues. And I'm not saying that if a child exhibits those at age 3 or 4, they're going to be dyslexic. What I am saying is that if you notice those signs, then it's worth looking into and supporting them with some explicit activities around phonemic awareness and really watching them closely. And then when they're in kindergarten, if you're still noticing those issues, it's worth having a conversation with the child's teacher, because here's the thing we know about dyslexia: they don't grow out of it. And too often we say, well, let's give them a year, let's let them mature. And dyslexia doesn't go away with maturity. And it might not be dyslexia, but we need to find out what that child's needs are early and get those interventions in place as early as we can. And there is actually a screener that was developed for early child by Dr. Katz, C-A-T-T-S. And we have that screener available in our district. It goes down to preschool, and it just tells you some of those things to look for.
Tiffany, who's the author of Conquering Dyslexia?
Dr. Jan Hasbrook, it's Jan, and then her last name is Hasbrouk. So again, it's Hasbrouk.
And Tiffany, you mentioned a couple books. Is there any other books you would recommend for parents to read?
Yeah, so the Conquering Dyslexia is the one I would start with because that sort of introduces you to everything and it does it in layman's terms. And then if you want to get in deeper, Dr. Sally Shaywitz has one called Overcoming Dyslexia. Some of her data is a little out of date because she talks about the reading first grant and all that, but the medical stuff about dyslexia is all right on target. If you wanted to get more into the learning aspect, Dr. Louisa Moats has a really good book out called Speech to Print. That one's good. And actually, if you go on the website and scroll down, I put a picture of all the covers of the books that I recommend.
Thank you, Tiffany. So we had a question about foreign language. So there are some questions about students who wanting or needing to take foreign language in order to maybe get into the college they want. Is there any resources for them or any strategies that you would suggest? Because I mean, a foreign language is hard and our students with dyslexia probably could use some sort of strategies.
Absolutely. So the first thing I would say is don't take one of the condensed courses in the summer because and I mean, I know that sounds funny, but we have had students try to do that because they just wanted to concentrate just on that, but it moves so fast that it's really hard. Foreign language is tough. It can be tough for students with the dyslexia profile. There's no getting around it. And we have actually heard of students working with colleges to say, what can I do instead of this requirement? Because, you know, I have this identified learning disability and I'm not able to do that. And so sometimes colleges will be flexible with that requirement. You can identify which colleges you're interested in and talk with them. But I would say if that's not the route you want to go and you really do want to pursue that foreign language, is start early and take it slow. You typically don't have to go into advanced foreign language for most college requirements. You can, I believe it's 2 years now, if that's the, my kids are out of college, but I believe that was the requirement for them. And so just take it slow, try to pace your schedule to where you don't have your hardest courses on the semester you're taking foreign language, and just try to support them outside. There are a lot of online resources too, such as Quizlet and tutoring that could help with that. But yeah, it's a heavy lift. There's no doubt about that.
Hey, Madhur, I'm happy to interject on a couple of the math questions. You just let me know when the appropriate time is.
Now is perfect, Nate.
Okay, great. In terms of teachers gaining access to training, they have access to ongoing professional development through our Envision and our iReady Classroom mathematics resource, and similar professional development is available to our high school educators as well. And really that CRA model is inherent in the resource that we're using. And so as they're planning for learning activities, because the authors of these resources lean heavily on the CRA model, they're naturally a part of those day-to-day lessons. In terms of supporting students who may have reading disabilities, one of the reading strategies ultimately that is a part of these resources and instructional routines for all of our educators. Formally, it's called a 3-read strategy, but ultimately our mathematicians in our classrooms are given the opportunity to work through a word problem in some cases, and they will leverage what's called the 3-read strategy. So the first time the problem will be read out loud, and we're asking our community of learners to think about what is this problem about, and having a brief discussion about the problem and what information is presented. And then the second time our mathematicians read the problem, they're asked to think about, what am I trying to solve in this problem? And there's a collective conversation and that community environment to be able to make sense of the mathematics in thinking about that second read. And then the third time the word problem is read, we're asking our mathematicians to think about, what is the key information in this problem? And that three-step approach is really a part of the instructional routine that our educators are leaning on, which we know not only will support students with dyslexia, but all of our mathematicians in our classrooms to gain access to the mathematics. And in this particular case, with starting with reading and making sense of the problem. So that's just one example, but just wanted to interject in response to those few questions there.
Okay. Thank you. It's about 12:15. So I wanted to make just a couple of more statements. We are looking at all of the questions in the Q&A. A number of them are very specific to students in school. So as always, we encourage you to work with your students, teachers, elementary teachers, middle school teachers, high school, maybe the specific teachers, English teachers, if they're having difficulty. Those kinds of things are very specific. We, as Marta said, there is a long list of questions from the RSVP list, and we will go through the Q&A here and add those generic questions to that too. We're going to take those questions and work with our literacy experts as well as our directors of special education and figure out the best way to address all of those questions, whether that is a Q&A session or something put out on the website or something like that. So I just wanted to let you know we're not ignoring your questions. There's 100+ of them out there, and that's not an exaggeration. And we just want to make sure that we can address the generic questions and then encourage you to really work with your schools. If you're having trouble working with your teachers or your students' teachers, the principal of your school is always sometimes your very best advocate. And don't feel afraid to go talk to the principal and ask for their assistance if necessary. So we want to address those questions. We know there's a lot of them. So for now, we would like to thank all of you for joining us, and especially thank our presenters for taking the time today to give us a very high-level overview of dyslexia. This presentation has been recorded, and so the slide deck and the recording will be posted on the website under the Special Education Task Force webpage. So it will be there. It may take it a week or so to get there. I'm not exactly sure, but it will definitely be there. So those of you that were asking to have access to it, we're going to place it there. I also want to reiterate what I'm losing my name. What was said about books, that there's books on the website of the literacy, to go and look there, because it sounded like there were a lot of good resources there. And so look there too. We will continue our parent engagement sessions this year. Right now, we do not have set topics and set dates, but we will have that information soon. And we'll be providing that out as soon as we have that. I think we were doing them, was it monthly, Marta? But we'll be getting those.
It was, I think, every other month or quarterly.
Okay.
So there's a few. I do think that there is some like small parent groups, or I know our directors are meeting with parent groups, and I think they're getting ideas for sessions from them. They really want to make sure that these are purposeful and really we're hitting and making sure we're getting topics that you guys want to see.
Yep. And we're always, if you have some ideas, you can shoot them out to the directors of the questions on the website. So anyway, thank you. We appreciate your participation today. We appreciate all of the presenters, and we hope you have a good afternoon.